Hey guys, it's Shadow. This is episode 9 of my 1k to 1k4 series, and this time we'll be focusing on map control. Map control refers to portions of the map in which you have established control through military, scouting, and/or buildings. Having control over an area with one of these alone is often not enough to maintain control over it. This topic is a little more complex than most of the videos we've done thus far, but I'll do my best to explain things. Scouting on its own does not really grant map control, but it will allow you to establish what parts of the map your opponent currently controls and where the weak points are. It also highlights extra resources around the map. During the later stages of the game, having map control over these areas can become of huge importance. Outposts in particular can be amazing for establishing map control through scouting. This is because you are constantly able to check areas around your outposts for what your opponent may be trying to do. The most dynamic way of map control shifting between players is the usage of their military units. Military units give you map control directly near where they are, of course, but also loosely give you control over a much larger area depending on the type and proximity to other units and buildings. For example, if you have an army of archers and knights split into these areas on the map, you will have direct control in these three areas, but will also loosely control the areas in between and behind due to your opponent not being able to do anything in these areas without your knowledge. However, if your opponent is able to pick up or force one of these groups back, they are able to regain map control in that area, and loosely regain a little more beyond that. Something you can do to increase your map control is split off a unit or two from your main groups of units. This gives you additional scouting information which can be used to further your map control. It also denies the opportunity for your opponent to sneak away villages or other small groups of units. Buildings of the military variety are good at establishing zones of map control that are harder to push back. This is especially the case with castles and to a lesser extent towers, walls, and town centres as well. Other military buildings such as siege workshop, barracks and such still grant a zone of control, but are far more pushable when there are not other military units or defensive buildings around. Towards the end of the game, having tens of buildings like barracks and stables is not uncommon. This is to further solidify gains in map control and of course make it easier to reinforce from all over the map. Getting map control is one thing, but knowing where to prioritize getting map control and using it is another. You should prioritize gaining map control on hills, in areas that have extra resources, or that deny resources or buildings in your opponent's area of control. Hills make it far harder to push you and far easier to push your opponents from that hill due to the damage bonuses that hills grant. Fighting uphill makes you take 25% less damage, and fighting downhill grants you an additional 25% damage, which is why hills are so important in Age of Empires. Capturing your opponent's resources and denying production buildings with castle drops or tower rushes can be quite risky if you do not have enough map control and army, but it is extremely annoying for your opponent to deal with if they are placed well. The more resources and production denied, the better. Towards the later stages of the game, map control and additional stones, golds and eventually woodlines become crucial. Preferably you will have town centres and or castles in these areas to protect your vulnerable economy. You can use map control for multiple purposes, including but not limited to securing extra resources, forcing opponents off of certain resources entirely, expanding your own base, taking relics, or forcing your opponent to take bad fights by threatening key areas in their base. Something of note is the role mobility plays in gaining and using map control. You may have very little map control, but mobile units can force your opponent to be placed in a more defensive position with their army. Having a mass of knights or other mobile units threatening your opponent's economy, or being able to pick off small groups of units that are less mobile like crossbows or siege, can cause map control to slowly shift in your favour. I hope that this basic guide for map control has been helpful. The next video will focus on the basics of army control. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with this series. Thanks for watching.